Wait, did everyone see that the Idaho and Frank Human Rights Memorial was just vandalized again with racist and anti-Semitic language?
What?
Look,
Why does that keep happening?
the article keeps referencing anti-Semitism. I have no idea what that is.
You're not alone. A lot of people don't see it or recognize it even when they're looking at it or hearing it. I've felt it. I'm Jewish and I've felt the irrational hatred.
Wait, so anti-Semitism means that there are people who don't like Jewish people?
Yeah, but it runs deeper than that.
But why? I don't understand why there are people who will single out a group of people and target them like that.
Gabrielle, we're talking about targeting a people who some view as a perceived racial group inferior or a people to be feared.
Oh, so it's racism.
In a way. But that's why language is so important. It all plays into the spiral of injustice.
Oh, yeah.
So, are neo-Nazi and white nationalists racist?
Yeah, but so are other people who hate others because of their race. I mean, they're racist too.
I agree, Emma. There are some people who think that white people are superior, that black, indigenous, Asian, Muslim, Jewish, and the list keeps going, is inferior. I think that when Europeans were inventing race-based labels and categorizing people back in the 1600s, Jewish people were considered as inferior.
1 second, Elijah, back up. I don't even know who Jewish people are. I mean, as a Christian, all I know is that they killed Jesus.
Whoa, Gabrielle, see that? That is an anti-Semitic statement.
How so? I mean, that's what happened.
Gabrielle, did I kill Jesus? Emma's spot on. That kind of belief fuels anti-Semitism from Christians.
Okay, I apologize. I didn't mean to offend anyone. I mean, I grew up in the Bible Belt, and that's what we were taught, you know? Like, nobody can mess with Jesus.
I mean, you do realize Jesus was a Jewish man, right? I mean,
Okay, look, I want to talk about this too. Elijah, no offense, but I thought Jewish was a religion. So is it a religion or a race?
It's about Jewish people. Some say that if your mother is Jewish, you are Jewish. Others say if either your mother or father. And of course, there are those who can convert to Judaism, which is a religion. But whether it's race or religion, what we're really talking about is a people, Jewish people.
That doesn't answer my question.
Yeah, I understand that there are some who think that there's something mysterious about who are Jewish people. There are people who have genetic ties to the Jewish people who originated from the Middle East who don't publicly identify as Jewish. There are Jewish people who don't practice Judaism.
So Jewish people are not white people.
The Nazis obviously didn't think so. They positioned that the Aryan race is superior and that the Jews were a race that was subhuman. But with that racial definition, there were blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jews that were able to escape by passing as Aryans.
right, because race is just a social construct.
Totally. And anyone of any race can be Jewish. Yes, there are Jewish people who appear more Middle Eastern. There are Jewish people who marry interracially. Like with any group of people, you know, genetic history can be a bit complex. And so although there is a genetic lineage that originated in the Middle East among Jewish people, what I keep going back to is that we're talking about a people, Jewish people.
But why all the targeting and hatred?
Well, it's called the other within the spiral of injustice.
Anti-Semitism has been on the rise for several years. There was that anti-Semitic white nationalist march in 2017 in Charlottesville, Virginia.
And there was also that mass shooting at the Pittsburgh synagogue in 2018.
Right. Yes, and there was the vandalism in the Idaho and Frank Human Rights Memorial.
Exactly.
Yeah, and a lot of people think anti-Semitism's just like a thing from the past.
But I want to understand why this happens specifically to Jewish people.
Sure, Chen, but just so you know, I'm not the spokesperson for all Jewish people.
Chen and Emma, are you the spokesperson for all Asian people?
Yes. Yeah, Jen, what do you have to say for the whole Asian community?
Oh, brother. So, to give you a little bit of historical context, the hatred and conspiracies date back thousands of years ago, way back in ancient Egypt.
Oh, I've heard that Jews were made into slaves so that they could build the pyramids.
Definitely not. The pyramids were built long before Jewish slavery in Egypt. Ancient Jewish people are believed to have been nomadic. They lived on the outskirts of the Egyptian, Assyrian, and Canaan empires until around 1200 BC. What originally separated the Jewish people was their belief in one God.
Oh, okay, because this is where most civilizations were polytheistic, right? So they believed in multiple gods.
Yes. And what happens when you're the minority and your customs and beliefs are different from everyone else?
You get targeted and labeled as the other.
But how does this translate into the anti-Semitism that happens today in America, since that happened thousands of years ago?
Yeah, good question, Chen. There's a history of avoidance that has carried over the centuries.
Talk about an ongoing challenge.
Yeah, I don't want to minimize Jewish history by summarizing it in a few sentences, but I do want to give you some background so you can understand how it shows up today.
Okay, so it started with Jewish people being the minority group who were oppressed and persecuted by the Egyptians.
Bingo. And it wasn't just with the Egyptians. For many centuries, Jewish people were targeted for persecution by the Egyptians, the Assyrians, the Canaanites, the Greeks, the Romans. But don't take my word for it. Do your own research. Eventually, populations of Jewish people migrated throughout Europe.
And what about Jesus?
Yes, monotheistic religions believing in one God. Islam, Christianity, Judaism, they all migrated.
Okay, and so this is where we get into religion splitting over differences in interpretation, right? So, like, some Arabs adopt Islam, others adopt Christianity, some Europeans, like, convert to Christianity, and...
Yeah, to make a long story short, in Europe, Jewish people lived as minorities, relegated to second class. This occurred in every major chapter of European history as Christianity spread.
I think I read somewhere that, like, Jewish people were blamed for the Black Plague.
Among other European problems, anti-Semitism just kept rearing its head.
But why?
Because people are always looking for something to explain what they, like, don't understand. You know, some people just can't handle the fact that bad things happen, and so blaming other people makes them feel like they have an answer.
Emma's right. I mean, what easier target than a group of people who are part of the society, but at the same time viewed as outside of the society? Does that sound familiar?
Yeah, I see. So cultural differences gave them a reason to blame people who are different from them for their own problems.
Right. Jewish people were prohibited from fully participating in society. They were locked out of certain professions. They couldn't vote. They couldn't build places of worship. They were even forced to live in separate neighborhoods, which just made it easier for them to be singled out, easier to be hated. From avoidance to...
Discrimination within the spiral of injustice. Yeah.
And the discrimination continued. It got particularly nasty after medieval times.
Right. I mean, there were all these perpetrated stereotypes in art and literature and...
Totally. Do you see the parallels with the Black, Latino, and Asian American communities?
Yes, but how did that carry through into America?
Let me ask you something. What has been the major religion of the West for the past several centuries?
Buddhism.
No.
Christianity had a default enemy? Is that what you're trying to say?
Remember how Jewish people were blamed for killing Jesus?
Oh, I get it. So with the spread of empire and religions also came the spread of discrimination. Antisemitism was a part of that.
Yeah, I mean, this is the same time that certain races are claiming they're, like, biologically superior to other races.
But doesn't that happen throughout history? That every group becomes tribal and claims theirs as the top tribe?
Yes, Chen, I agree. I mean, this is just natural.
Sure, tribal pride is a natural thing, but we're not talking about wearing different football jerseys here.
Yeah. I'm with Elijah on this. I mean, we're talking about real human beings, right? Real people. And These ideas have real consequences. And sure, maybe it's one thing to say that someone's from another tribe, but you can still see them as a person, a part of a shared human race. But once you start claiming that science proves that one race is less human than another, I mean, it just spirals out of control.
Yeah, it moves beyond just denying the lesser people access to resources. It moves into actually believing that violence against them is okay.
Yeah, that they're not even human.
Yeah, that they don't deserve the right to live.
Violence. That's the next stage in the spiral of injustice.
All right, now the violence. Beginning in the 1890s, hundreds of thousands of Jewish people migrated to the United States due to increased persecution where they came from.
And all these shifts are happening during the Industrial Revolution.
Right, so everyone's competing with these arriving immigrants for access to resources, opportunities, social status.
And what do you think the established Americans did to the new Jewish populations?
Discriminated against them.
You got it. Nowhere near the levels of hatred they experienced in Europe, Jewish people were also the other people. There were many U.S. cities that prohibited Jews from running for and holding office, from building synagogues, and limited Jewish access to public facilities.
Here in America? I had no idea.
Yeah. In the South, even though black people weren't allowed to testify against white people in court, they were allowed to testify against Jews at the turn of the 20th century.
This anti-Semitism runs deep.
So do the conspiracy theories. There were conspiracy theories about Jewish people betraying their governments and their leaders during times of war. There were other conspiracies about how Jews were taking over the banks, and even worse, targeting and abusing children.
And what do conspiracies do?
I think for some people, they become a false reality, something they hold on to, even when it's not true.
Yeah.
Emma mentioned that black people were able to testify against Jewish people in courts. There was a famous case back in 1913.
Oh, this is the one where a Jewish man was lynched by a mob in Georgia.
Yeah, that case you're talking about is the case of Leo Frank. Leo Frank was Jewish. He resettled from the north to Georgia to take over management of a pencil factory. A body of a child employee was found murdered one morning. Leo Frank was taken to trial, and a black worker of the factory testified against him, and Leo Frank was convicted of murder.
Wow, that's intense.
Yeah.
It is, especially since the case couldn't be proven, and it relied on circumstantial evidence that was tinged with anti-Semitism.
Yeah, I mean, that combined with the fact that there were all these conspiracies about Jewish people sacrificing young Christian children, I mean, really feeds the locals' hate.
You have no idea. Frank was sentenced to life in prison, but then the locals took matters into their own hands, and they kidnapped him from jail and lynched him.
Wait, what?
Yeah, the murderers were never tried or convicted.
Wait, doesn't this have something to do with the KKK?
Yeah, the murderers called themselves the Knights of Mary Fagin, and they eventually became part of the KKK.
You know, the KKK was, still is, anti-Semitic, anti-Black, it's even anti-Catholic. You know, and this is all part of that underbelly of religious extremism.
Fear of the other.
Happening all around the world.
Wait a minute. I do recall hearing about a Jewish plan to take over the world. Seems crazy.
Yeah, that's an interesting conspiracy that's been around for hundreds of years. It was a fabricated text called The Protocols of the Elders of Zion. It outlined Jewish plans to take control of the banks, to corrupt morality, and to control the press. It was fake, but it was pushed to be written by Jewish leaders. Sound familiar?
Talk about disinformation.
So then we move from the turn of the 20th century, then to World War I, which was blamed on German Jews, and then the Holocaust and World War II.
Right. I mean, we all know that Hitler and the Nazis spread anti-Semitism and beliefs that Jewish people were inferior, and that brings us into the final stage of the spiral, elimination. And it goes without saying that the Holocaust was beyond horrible. It was the systemic and state-sponsored elimination of over 6 million Jews. And yet there are some people who pretend it never even happened.
Isn't that anti-Semitism too?
You got it. But anti-Semitism didn't end there. It wasn't only in Germany. Remember, ideas aren't erased just because the behavior is halted. American Jews, though not at the extreme levels in Germany, still experienced injustices. Remember the fake text, the protocols of the elders of Zion? That was spread throughout the United States too.
What?
Yeah, newspapers came out with anti-Semitic materials all the time. And it was even on national radio programs during the 1920s and 30s. Many of those beliefs are still very present.
Right. And what happens when you see or hear something enough?
You begin to believe it.
Yeah, you want to talk about extreme. The Anti-Defamation League has reported historic levels of anti-Semitic violence.
You know, with groups like the KKK and white nationalists on the rise, it seems like we need to be more aware of what's going on.
Injustice is what's going on.
A spiral of injustice.
Time to call it out when we see it.
Exactly. I mean, that's the only way to resolve this. You know, we need to call out anti-Semitism when we see it, because when it starts with one group, it'll spread to everyone. You know, no one is safe when it's happening to anyone.
Yet hate isn't just about Jews, but Jews are a vehicle for hate that can lead to everyone else.
Didn't we read something like that on the memorial? What was it? First, they came after the socialists, and I didn't do anything because I wasn't a socialist.
Yes, right. Then they came for the trade unionists, but he wasn't one of them, so he didn't speak out.
And then they came for the Jews, and he still didn't speak out because he wasn't a Jew.
Right. And then they came for him, and there was nobody left to speak out.